morning, good afternoon, good evening. There is a lot more to this ED2030 than just the outburst from Blessed Geza. Here is an insightful video on the issue.
Very long-standing ally of President Emerson Mnangagwa. They're very, very close. At one point, both Christopher Mnangagwa and his wife Monica were both members of cabinet. Mnangagwa and Mnangagwa's relationship extends to their time during the war in Mozambique, and he mentions it in the interview. Outside of that, in 2017, Mnangagwa played quite a critical role. He had been an ambassador stationed in China at some point. He had been stationed in New York at some point. He had and has very good relationships with the Afrikaner community in South Africa and the different wealthy and powerful individuals who have the say, the who's who in the SADC region. So the role that Chris played in 2017 was basically being able to speak to diplomats and sell the coup to the various players within the region. The most important ones, according to Chris himself, being the people within the South African government who initially, if you remember, they weren't quite pleased with what happened. There had been a similar skirmish in Lesotho, and I think at the time the South African defense minister had said we won't allow a coup in our backyard. And when there were reports that there'd been a coup in Zimbabwe, initially South Africa wasn't happy. I remember the protests being done and people saying Zuma should stay out of Zimbabwe's business. And Zuma himself told the SABC, I believe at the time, that he had spoken to Mugabe. Mugabe said he was fine, but he was confined in his home. And Zuma was concerned. He sent a delegation of ministers. And Mnangagwa's job at the time was to ensure that he solved that potential diplomatic problem in South Africa. Now, on to what Mnangagwa says about 2030. I think those words are best heard from the horse's mouth. So listen up to his interview.
Let inspiration find you.
My apologies.
So in terms of in terms of direction, where do things go for us?
We're going for he wants, this guy wanted to be anointed to be president, the successor of president. So you want to remove the president, but as I said, one more remover, anoint. How do you do that? You are squaring a circle. Yeah, Mugabe to nominate. I'll give you my number 2. Number 1, this time I would know. We must go for elections. Well, that's normal for a democratic party.
Now,
can you imagine? Half of the electorate are women in this country, more than half.
Yeah.
And you have decapitated the lips of your former wife through cruelty. And you are refusing to see your children, including Wakawe and Aekwauri. And you are number 1, Agadakumite pardon, or Amite Onoramba Utanza, you can't do that. So he reeks of cruelty against all women in the country. Women, you are going to Ameva Gana Wagata Fambigana, Uru Wagambo Rodmuna, and Juzi Samra Meva Gokumbo, no Zizi. So he can't win, but he wants, so he doesn't want the elections. So the president of Amita up end. What are we doing in Congress? Can you go and sell yourself to the electorate, to the party electorate? You own a baggage, Yagadar. Yeah. Then remember, and I'm going to be candid with you. If you want to know the Shona person with an Agwenda Uchkoro, we see the error Pamberi Park. Because Ara comes from the mother, error comes from the teacher. That's the basic, litmus test of an illiterate Shona person. So he never managed to graduate from the mother's alphabet. So what we're going to wonder is no subject. It's again that university. Takasodzokera futhi kaenda ku university. Kuenda kuhondo is no substitute for illiteracy and ignorance.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah.
So it's just these are the things which, and you were commanding an army by contrivance. Uri illiterate, army yevana vakaenda vachibva kuTekwani, vachibva kwaTsambe, vachibva kwaMukaro, vachibva kuSairini. These are the people who fought. Vodzoka voenda kuchikoro vapona hondo. Wopedzera wakuita commander wavo iwewe. How do you command such an erudite and educated army you are illiterate? You think they can endear themselves to them? But akaenda kuDRC hauna vakamuproga hana kana kumboendeswa kuno command.
Oh, is that so?
Yes.
Oh,
He doesn't know anything about that war, I told you. Kambeu Aginyu ndiye akaendeswa Chimopo.
all right.
A field commander of not and hapana zviri papo.
Yeah, it's
He's already pumped up it, I mean nothing else.
so this thing year 2030 dead, is it going to happen?
He's dead because number one, he trapped them. People did not want this guy. Saka pavakanzwa kuti anga ari kuda kuitwa anointed, vanhu vakati tingasva tagara naaripo pane uyu. So it was a resistance against him 2030. But now number one is outsmarted him by saying ina handisi kuenda ku2030 tiri kuenda kucongress. Iwo vanhu vari kuti we must stick to the constitution. I agree. But the constitution ipati inoti munoenda kuma-elections, no anointment. This is the crux of the matter, no anointment. And unovhoterwa nevanhu. And can uchimuonepo paipa, if he goes for a vote, he probably, his left hand may not vote for him.
So and then
Well, this is very interesting indeed. What we are witnessing here is another dimension to this whole saga of ED2030. The merits of it or demerits of it, time will tell. Whether Chris Mnangagwa is saying the truth or not, time will tell. If history, the true story, the truth is ever revealed. But what matters here is to appreciate that what we are talking about here is a really complex political system. Complex in the sense that this is a party that has been obsessed with power. And they've been fighting each other within the party for influence ever since the founding of that party. The common thread that has run through Zanu PF is political patronage. How the individual leader has surrounded himself with yes men whom he has tried to bribe and keep in positions on the basis not of their performance, but of their blind loyalty to him. This is the common thread that has run through Zanu PF. And the party has achieved nothing because of that. Here is Dr. Simbama Koni explaining how this bribing and political patronage started soon after independence.
I recall very clearly that when we came into office in 1980, we inherited Ian Smith's systems. And Ian Smith's ministers drove Peugeot 504s. They drove themselves from home to work in their Land Rovers and all in kinds. Most of them were farmers. They parked their Land Rover and then they used the government vehicle when they were at work with a chauffeur. When they finished at night, they packed them and they took theirs to go home. Within the month of our coming into office, Prime Minister Mugabe then directed that every minister be issued with an E-class Mercedes-Benz. And the Peugeot 504s were retired to permanent secretaries, and the deputy ministers who then took over. We can also look at many other things, small they may appear at the time. Let me hazard that even at that point, Enos Nkala was our Minister of Finance. I don't think we knew what budget we inherited from Ian Smith when the decision was taken to buy those E-class fleets for the ministers. So the material affection for material things has always been with us. And the differentiation also, even going back into the camps, Zema Shefu, Neze, my comrades, Makada, were not the same. So much so that even today, when the so-called Minister for Presidential Affairs or Provincial Governor, as they were, goes to Bubi or Binga, they will be served separately and differently from the other people. The avarice grew as we began to exploit the opportunities of office. When I was in the government, the minister was allocated one vehicle that they kept, which was the sedan they used in town. If you needed to go off-road, then your ministry hired off-road vehicles from the CMED, and you were charged for it. Now a minister will have an average of 4 vehicles in his forecourt, all at government's expense.
So the leadership modeled the wrong kind of behavior, and that kind of behavior permeated all across our society. Our CEOs, like you're saying, heads of parastatals and so forth, modeled from the top.
Indeed. Indeed. I made a passing reference that we have CEOs who will buy themselves a luxury car when they can't pay wages at the end of the week or end of the month. This has been so entrenched in our psyche, this showing off, as if you are a different person. You're breathing different air from those who don't drive Prados and Land Cruisers, from those who don't drive Jeep Cherokees. We have lost our humanity.
Well, I'll stop it there. The point is trying to make there is that we have created a political system in which the ruling elite are forever fighting for power. And once you're in the position of power, you bribe those around you with trappings of high office so that they remain blindly loyal to you. Mugabe was able to stay in power for 37 years because he had the fortune of inheriting in 1980 an economy that was rich. He inherited the economy with the biblical 7 fat cows and 7 fat ears of corn. And ever since he got into power, as Makoni was explaining there, the first thing he did is buy the E-Class Mercedes-Benz limos for his ministers. The patronage system kicked off. And as time went on, the trappings had to be increased because the appetite of those in the ruling elite was growing. Whereas soon after independence, they were content with just an ordinary low-density house. As time went on, they wanted a mansion. They wanted not just one E-Class limousine for themselves, but another one for their wife and children, and so on and so forth. The greed, the avarice, as Dr. Makoni explained, grew. When Mnangagwa took over in 2017, he inherited an economy where instead of the 7 fat cows, I think we can say there was only one, which was as thin as a skeleton. That wasn't producing anything. The economy by that time was in serious trouble. And so he has not been able to keep up with the demands of his colleagues. And this is why the likes of Blessed Geza are now up in arms. The cake is small, and it's definitely not enough to satisfy the insatiable appetite of all the Zanu PF leadership. And so there are bound to be some who will be unhappy. And Geza this time was at the forefront of that. In 2017, others like Victor, Chris Mnangagwa himself, were at the forefront of being unhappy with Mugabe. This time, Geza and others are at the forefront of being unhappy with Mnangagwa. I've said on this platform that the 2017 military coup failed to deliver even one democratic change, which is what the ordinary Zimbabwean was hoping for. And the reason for it is very simple. The coup was not about delivering democratic change. This was an in-house fighting for power, for dominance. It was a factional fight between the Lacoste and G40. the Lacoste faction prevailed with the help of the army. And we can all see it was with the help of the army, because the government that was formed post the coup was dominated by those who had played a key role in the army, in the coup. VP Chiwenga was the chief, the commander. He became the VP, vice president. The spokesperson of the coup, Moyo, became the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Another key player in the coup, Terence Shiri, became Minister of Agriculture, and so on and so forth. It was about power. It was not about ending the dictatorship and delivering good governance. No. That's why it failed to deliver any of those things, because it wasn't about good governance. The argument here is that as much as people would want to believe that Blessed Geza and the war veterans around him are fighting to stop Mnangagwa, this ED2030, from corrupting the constitution so that he could stay in power beyond the 2020 end. And hopefully deliver the democratic change that the nation has been dying for. The truth of the matter is, Geza himself said it, in fact, that this is not about that at all. Geza and company want Chiwenga to succeed Mnangagwa. This is about power. Why some people keep on hoping that if they support the Geza faction, they will somehow deliver, get the democratic changes that they want and end this case of rigged elections. Beggars belief. Those people are being naive and deceiving themselves. More so this time. To have supported the 2017 military coup was a big mistake. But to do it again would be unforgivable, because it will clearly show that we as a nation are failing to learn from the past. The Zanu PF dictatorship is the elephant in the room. Yes, Mnangagwa himself, as the dictator of the day, is the figurehead of that dictatorship. But anything that seeks only to replace Mnangagwa and leave the dictatorship intact is a failure. Just as the 2017 military coup sought to replace Mugabe with Mnangagwa and left the dictatorship itself untouched. We must focus on what needs to be done the elephant in the room, the dictatorship itself. And if anyone still thinks that swapping one dictator with another will end the dictatorship itself, that is being naive. Zanu PF will never reform itself out of office. That is a fundamental truth that we should not even be discussing at this stage. We should all know that to be a fact. This video, which, like I said, you can see for yourself the full video, I think it brings up some very important points and knowledge on what this is all really about. Is available at that address. The most important revelation it brings is that Zanu PF is the party of thugs. And they've been preoccupied ever since the party's formation with power. That is all they care about. They've pretended to champion the suffering of the ordinary Zimbabweans, but that has only been as a cover-up. A convenient peg on which they could, on the basis of which they could mobilize the ordinary people. What they really care about is absolute power. And I think it is high time that the people of Zimbabwe stopped being so naive and gullible. They're easily conned into believing that the regime, that the party leadership has changed, when in reality it has not changed at all. So the take-home message from me today is to remind Zimbabweans that supporting the Geza revolution, when all it seeks is to replace Mnangagwa with Chiwenga, is totally misguided. We should focus on what will dismantle the dictatorship and not be distracted by actions that are only seeking to replace one dictator with another. Food for thought. Thank you very much. Have a good day.